Our next speaker will be Dr. Sabrina Swenson. She graduated from Iowa State University College of Veterinary Medicine in 1988. She spent a year in small animal practice and then returned to Iowa State, where she earned a master's and PhD in veterinary microbiology. She spent 2.5 years working in research and development for a biologics company in the Kansas City area, and then returned to Ames to work for the National Veterinary Services Laboratories. She spent 22 years working in the diagnostic virology laboratory, first as the bovine and porcine section head, and then as the diagnostic virology laboratory director. She is currently a reviewer with the Center for Veterinary Biologics, where she has worked for 3 years.
Good afternoon. For those of you that have that page thing that you flip open, just for clarification, I am listed as still being at National Veterinary Services Laboratories, but I'm actually with the Center for Vet Biologics at this point. The goal today is really to give everybody just kind of a big overview of the types of vaccines that can be licensed through USDA, to also give you an idea of some of the newer technologies that are being used in the way of vaccines that can be used, addressing concerns that have been raised in the past about the need to be able to get vaccines to the market a little bit quicker. So we actually at CVB, we teach a week-long course to biologics firms, employees on all the things you need to know about licensing biologics. So that's not something that we can cover in 20 minutes. I'm going to give you just an overview. I'm happy to discuss things at a later point, but I just want to kind of keep a big overview on this. So where we're going to go today is, and one more thing before I forget. In the abstract, you're going to see a link that takes you to where all of our regulations are at, the 9 CFR, the VSMs, and that type of thing. The other thing I want to point out for you is several years ago, we started down a path called single tier. So what we're trying to do is use the same type of terminology requirements and languages on our labels so that it's very transparent on what a vaccine does and doesn't do. If you go to that website and look over on the right or left-hand side, you'll see product compilation summaries. So it's a great one-stop shop to find out about different vaccines. And you can sort by, if you know the product code number, if you know the species, like you want to look up on swine, you can sort by that. And it's a great opportunity to see some of the work that the firms did as part of getting their vaccine to market. As far as where we're going to go today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what CVB has perceived as the industry needs related to vaccine production. Talk very briefly about influenza diversity, which in itself is a week-long discussion, vaccine options, and then a little bit about vaccine application, which as a regulator for vaccines, I'm really limited on what I can talk about, but we're going to touch that briefly. And then I want to try to bring it all together in one table, which will be kind of the thing that I want you to walk away with today so that you understand the differences between the vaccines and can make informed decisions the directions you want to go. So from our perspective at CVB, what we are hearing is that there's increased pressure to get vaccines to market quicker to deal with these emerging diseases. And we have different kinds of emerging diseases. So we have PED, which emerged in the United States, but we had information about because it was in Europe and it was in Asia. And then we have the emerging diseases like PRRS, where there is no history and no understanding, and we learned the hard way through those types of things. And I really appreciated the talk this morning walking through PRRS, because I was actually in grad school when that was going on, and it really brought back some really good memories. And then we have the ones that we're used to living with that decide that they have to change all the time. So influenza has two things going for it to evade the immune system, one of which is it has the ability to go through antigenic drift. So there are pressures that cause it to change over time, which makes it difficult to stay current on your vaccination. And then we also have another aspect, because of it has a genome that's segmented, it can swap, and it really likes to share its different genes with other influenza viruses. And so you come up with a lot of different things that make life very interesting to try to keep your pigs immune from the impacts of influenza. There's also an increasing desire to have customized biologics. You've got a unique thing in your area, you're trying to deal with it, whether it's on a farm basis, a flow basis, a regional basis. So there's a lot of interest in being able to have vaccines that'll work that way. The challenge that we have is that we've got to balance that vaccine need with the ability to regulate those vaccines and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So we have to balance the industry needs with what we need to do to ensure that vaccines going on the market are safe, pure, efficacious. Now, I'm not expecting anybody to look at this and say, understand what's going on. The big picture I want you to get is look at all the colors. So on the one side, we've got the number of swine influenza isolates that have been identified. On the bottom, we have the quarter of the year. So we start in 2011 and we end in 2021. Each bar is a quarter. On the top, H1, on the bottom, H3. What I'm trying to have you understand with all these wonderful colors is that there's a lot of different types of influenzas out there. They're all H1, they're all H3. They're the things that we're used to working with. But there's a lot of diversity, which makes it a challenge to keep our animals protected. And I just highlighted this one thing here, that just looking at this data alone, we've got 25 distinct clades that we're trying to deal with in order to protect our animals from. And we're constantly fighting change, either through antigenic drift or antigenic shift, where they swap their genes out to try to keep our pigs protected. And I do want to thank Tavis Anderson with ARS. He provided me with this particular slide. So the vaccine options that we have available at this point, we basically have 5 options. And the first 3 are probably the ones you're most familiar with. Our traditional whole virus, whole bacteria type of vaccines that have been around for a very, very long time. Now, I'm giving you VSM numbers up here. That's only if you would go to the website and want to learn more. I'm just trying to cue you into what those might be. Several years ago, CVB recognized the concerns we were running into in the swine industry and the equine industry related to the virus changing and the ability to make more rapid changes. So this VSM came out that allowed for swapping out the different viruses in these whole virus vaccines that would allow minimal change or minimal additional regulations be done. It allowed for that movement to happen at a faster basis rather than starting from scratch with a brand new vaccine. So that was kind of a first step in how do we get vaccines to the market a little bit quicker. The conditionally licensed vaccine has to jump through the same hoops that we see for a regularly licensed vaccine, except that it only has to show reasonable expectation of efficacy. So it doesn't have to go through the entire vaccination challenge model that we would see with a fully licensed vaccine. However, the expectation is that vaccine will eventually become fully licensed, will have to meet all those requirements, but we're making that vaccine available to meet kind of an emergency need. The other one that people are probably very familiar with is the autogenous vaccines. And those are vaccines that historically have been described as we isolate something out of a herd, what we call the herd of origin, and then it's inactivated and made into a vaccine and used back in that herd of origin. If you work with autogenous vaccines very much, you might want to go back and look at that memo. It was updated last fall. It adds some additional ability to use the vaccine in other herds. It addresses information as far as being able to extend the use of your isolate for a longer period of time than has been in the past. So if you're working with autogenous, using them in your herds and that type of thing, you might want to take a look at that and make sure you understand the changes that actually were done to benefit the industry. The last 2 that I want to talk about are ones that really within the last 3 to 4 years have really been kind of a new addition to what CVB is looking at for the way of regulating vaccines. And that's your platform products and your prescription platform. So what is a prescription, or excuse me, a platform product? And generally what it is it's a fully licensed vaccine. It has to go through the same things that we would do for our conventional vaccines, but it establishes what we call the platform. So once we have that platform licensed, there's a way to do expedited licensing of additional vaccines based on that platform. So it's kind of like your base recipe, and then you're adjusting accordingly to what different things you need to work with. And the thing to remember with this particular type of product is consistency in manufacturing. So once you start down a path with the way you're going to manufacture, which includes the adjuvant, the dose you're going to give, the route you're going to give, the age of the animal you're going to give, all of those things are part of the consistent manufacturing. You are staying with that for any additional things that you may want to work with. Now, there are ways to change that, like if you want to go into a different age in that, it just requires additional work in order to get that vaccine licensed. So the main things that we're looking at when we do this is your initial product to establish your platform. And then we need to look at your vector or expression system. So again, confidentiality, I can't talk about what people are doing, but you have this basic way that you're always going to produce this vaccine. It's always expressed the same way. And then your gene of interest is going to be established. So when we're talking about influenza, we're going to talk usually about our hemagglutinin. We're usually talking about our neuraminidase as our gene of interest that we're wanting to put into this vaccine for protection purposes. Again, I mentioned the manufacturing process. Consistency is the key. If there's any changes made in that process, it changes our ability to move forward with a platform product. And so manufacturers have to be really thinking in advance as they're going down this path what it is that they want. And it is possible to actually license multiples fairly close to each other if you've thought through this whole process and determined, like for instance, age of pig, dose route, and that type of thing. And then finally on the platform products, we ensure that they demonstrate efficacy. In other words, they're going to work to protect the animal the way we expect them to do, and safety. And as Dr. Roof had mentioned, there are a number of different things that can impact safety in animals, so it's very important that we understand that these products, if we're going to start moving things in and out of them, that they are safe. So to get kind of a better understanding of what this means for the people that are using them in the field, we have a licensed product. We've established it. For instance, we're establishing it in this instance based on the hemagglutinin. We established it using an H1 as our base for our platform. However, what we can do with this product once it's licensed is we can swap out that H. So if we need to become a little bit more relevant to what's circulating, we can swap our H out. We can also swap in an H3 even though we started with H1. So there's a little bit more flexibility and it's a little bit faster than what we've been able to do in the past. What we can't do with the platform is change the actual type of gene of interest. So we can't go to using an N if we established our platform on the H. So thinking ahead to where you want to go with these vaccines, it's really important that this is all kind of thought out well in advance as you're moving down this. So then going back again to the concept of being able to swap out of your initial product, we have minimized the number of requirements that you have to go through in order to get these licensed. Now, I will say this is very new, and so there may be situations where there's a red flag. There's something about a particular virus or something like that that we may have to do some additional discussion. So it sounds simple, but it isn't always going to be quite that simple. So to do these swap outs, we really need to know that there is field relevance, and that field relevance can be based on subject matter experts in the field. It can be based on peer-reviewed literature that talks about these. We do SIF, which is a summary information format. It's just a format that the firms have to actually describe how they produce this particular thing so that we can ensure that it meets the requirements of the platform. And then we will do confirmatory testing of that master sequence just to make sure that what is supposed to be there is there as part of our regulatory compliance. Generally, we don't need to meet these other things that are on the bottom of the list, but again, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis, and what we're learning about a new virus that might be coming in as far as the new antigen that we might be putting in with the new influenza. Prescription platform is based off your platform. So you cannot have a prescription platform vaccine until you've had the platform, because we need to establish all the manufacturing criteria and ensure that we have everything in place. And so with our prescription, it's really a customized biologics. It's kind of like doing an autogenous. It's customized to your farm from the standpoint that the veterinarian is looking at what's going on in the farm. The veterinarian is determining what it is that needs to be in that vaccine. And then based on that, a prescription vaccine can be produced. The thing that's really important to understand with this is it is tested for safety. It is not tested to demonstrate efficacy. So you don't know if what you're doing is actually going to be efficacious in your farm or not. So it's important to understand the difference between a platform vaccine and a prescription platform vaccine. And again, just kind of a cartoon type of thing to really kind of understand where we're going with this. So in a prescription platform, unlike a standard platform, you can, if we started out with H as the platform, we can put an N into this. We can actually take a gene from a different organism, so not even influenza, we can put it into this. So it's a little bit different. It helps a producer and practitioner to get closer to something that's moving kind of fast in their farm. But again, you're a little bit limited here in understanding that we have no efficacy information to go along with this. So just a comparison side by side between the prescription and platform. They're basically the same thing except for a couple of different things. One is the platform being limited to that particular, for instance, hemagglutinin. You can only swap out the hemagglutinin. Where with a prescription, you can swap the hemagglutinin, you can put in a neuraminidase, you can put in an organism, a gene from a different organism. When we look at the restriction as far as being a veterinary prescription type of thing, that is going to be only on under your prescription platform. Your platform is like a standard vaccine. You can buy it like you normally would do. The one thing I did not mention about this as we were going through is we do have limitations on what we will allow. So for instance, foreign animal diseases, not a candidate for going down this path. So we do have a few limitations as far as what we will and won't allow to go into these types of products. Vaccine application in the field, you know, this isn't new. This is all stuff that we all know. We need to know what's going on. We need to know what we're bringing in. We need to know what's circulating in our farm over time. And there's some really, really good publications that talk about following barns over time and seeing how the virus changes and seeing how different viruses actually are coming into the farm. So diagnostics are a must. You're going to have to follow these herds and know what's going on in order to be able to really effectively try to manage influenza in your herds. And then the other thing that we oftentimes don't think about related to influenza, I mean, if you've been in the influenza field for a while, you always hear the pigs are the mixing vessel and the pigs are the ones responsible for all the problems we have. And I would actually say people are quite responsible for a lot of our pig problems that we have because of the fact that we have the ability to share our influenzas with pigs just like they can share with us. So it's really important as part of your process of trying to control influenzas, consider what the people that are working in the facilities are potentially doing as far as exposing pigs to human influenza. And we have lots of data to show that human influenzas are jumping into pigs on a reasonably frequent situation. So it's something to think about as you're trying to figure out how to manage your swine herds, is to think about the opportunities where you're bringing it into the farm. And there was actually a really nice publication recently in which people were tested going into the barn, tested coming out of the barn, and seeing how much influenza they were taking in and how much they were taking out. So it is something that we need to be concerned about, and lots of times we don't necessarily think of the people part contributing to our influenza problem. And then as far as vaccination application in the field, you're going to have to tailor your vaccination strategy, and you're going to have to be flexible, because you may find that over time, due to virus changes or due to the way you're managing your herd, changes in your flow, and that type of thing, you're going to have to adjust your vaccination approach to things. It may be the timing of when you're going to do it. It may be the vaccine that you're using. There's lots of different things that need to be taken into consideration. The one thing that we don't have to worry about is flu's always going to change. So we're always going to be trying to get ahead of it, but we're probably always going to be kind of behind it. There is no magic bullet. I wish I could stand up here and tell you, with as many years as I've got in influenza, I wish I could tell you this is how you do it. But it's a virus that's very complex, and it's really good at changing. And so we're going to continue to have lots of problems with this virus as we move forward in trying to address immunology and trying to get pigs immune. And it's very also unfortunate for us trying to do this is that about the time that they really become susceptible is the time where we were still fighting with maternal antibodies. So it becomes very difficult to, it's kind of like doing dogs when I was in practice. You know, you hit them multiple times trying to hit that window where you can get some immunity and get past that maternal antibody. So this is kind of the take-home chart that I want you to kind of walk away with to understand the difference between all these different vaccine options that are available. And all of them are available for influenza except for the conditional, and the only reason the conditional is not available under our traditional way of thinking is that once we get a licensed vaccine, a fully licensed vaccine, the manufacturers have to get their conditional to fully licensed, or they have to stop producing. So that's why we don't actually have conditional listed here, because we have licensed vaccines on the market, so a conditional wouldn't be considered. But again, the thing I want you to understand walking out of here today is the safety and the efficacy aspects of it. Depending on the direction that you're going, you are going to have information related to safety, you're going to have information related to efficacy, and sometimes you won't even have the efficacy component. So you need to take that into consideration along with the issues that you're dealing with on the farm in evaluating the risk. Which direction do I need to go at this point in time based on the issues I'm facing? And that decision-making will change over time depending on the virus you're working with, what flow of pigs you're working with. I definitely don't envy practitioners and having to face this disease. It's a tough one. And so with that, I would open it up for any questions that anybody may have.